So, welcome everybody to episode 2 of a 3-part series on what are called non-CO2 or short-lived climate or super pollutants, which we're bringing to you with We Don't Have Time TV and the Climate and Clean Air Coalition, which is hosted by the UN Environment Programme. Episode 1, yesterday, was looking at the science and the technology of these pollutants. They have names, some of which are familiar, some of which maybe aren't. Methane, soot, hydrofluorocarbons or hydrofluorocarbons, yeah, that's a bit of a mouthful. But they're all in our economies, they are all getting into our environment, they're getting into our air, they're getting to an atmosphere, they're aggravating climate change, they're causing damage to crops, and also to public health, and many, many, many other impacts. So there's a real opportunity, according to the best science, that if we act quickly to manage down and perhaps maybe even one day phase out these pollutants, we could get big wins for climate change, big wins for crop production, big wins for human health. So that's why we're here, that's why we're doing the series. To set the scene on today's part 2, which is going to be on government policy, which is absolutely indispensable to this. You can have the best science in the world and the best technology in the world, but if government policy is not pointing in the right direction, how can you empower countries, communities, but also indeed the private sector too? So today, it's government policy. To set the scene, I have Martina Otto. She's head of the UN Environment Programme's Climate and Clean Air Coalition, as mentioned. And we're here in Nairobi, Martina, so very welcome. Great to see you.
Fantastic.
Yeah, can you...
Here with you.
Yeah, it's great to be here with you too, and our other wonderful guests too. Martina, can you tell us a little bit, give us a bit of a scene setter on how you feel government policy is evolving to factor in these short-lived super pollutants, how it's going, perhaps also with an eye on also where it will go, hopefully, over the coming years. We've got 2 important COPs in Azerbaijan at the end of this year, and a really, really important big COP, you might call. There's always big COPs from time to time. Think Paris in 2015. We got a big COP in Brazil. So, Martina, over to you.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Nick. And you're absolutely right. It's a critical year, this year, to look at policies, to look at the NDC reviews. And I unpack that for everybody who is not into the jargon. And that's the nationally determined contributions. That's a way through which countries express their commitments submitted to the climate agreement. And that's a way of giving an indication where they want to put the emphasis and drive down emissions. Now, there's a review. It's planned as part of the Paris Agreement every 5 years, and this is coming up, and that's a really important milestone to show the direction where things are going. And to date, the NDCs, only about half of them, have short-lived climate pollutants factored in one way or the other. And that needs to be ratcheted up because it's totally not in line with, number one, the impact that the short-lived climate pollutants do have on current climate. So about almost 50% of current warming is caused, but also the mere fact that we're a little bit with our backs against the wall and need to take action very, very urgently on this climate crisis. We have seen that numbers came out, we might even hit the 1.5 limit that we all eye on in the next 5 years. And that means reducing those short-lived climate pollutants that can bring down the temperature in the near term is actually really critically important. And this is why it's not commensurate to have only half of those NDCs looking at short-lived climate pollutants. So, but that's only one step. It will help to unlock some of the climate financing, which obviously is really critically important to take things on, and we'll hear about that tomorrow. But it's really also how to take that action at home. And this is where the policies come in. Sometimes people may think that's not so fancy, but it's really at the heart of driving action. In some cases, private sector will not be mobilized if there is not the right sort of policy framework that is there. And so it comes with a bit of a stick and the carrot. Some of those policies can actually take us positively to the next step, and others can actually be a bit more reprimanding on things that are not happening as they should. And yesterday we heard the example of the fossil fuel sector, where we did say methane reductions from fossil fuel is actually profitable. We talk about negative cost, which is equal profit, but you do make profit, more profit, if you take other actions. So if the same pot of money serves with a higher return on investment, it's not getting done because the businesses are not in the business of doing good, but in making business. And here, the regulation is really, really important to set the right framework conditions that this is being done, so that it's actually just as attractive as doing the other actions. That's one example. Another example is we've been helping we've provided support to the Kenyan government on waste, a waste act that has been adopted, and that is deferring powers to the local governments. And I think that's really important as well, because there's this interplay between the central government and the subnational, so regional and local, in the implementation. So that's really important. So it's unlocking implementation. And the last example I want to give, just to make it a bit more lively, food waste. I think we can all relate to that. It's something that we don't want to do. But if we produce food waste, it's not only a waste of resource that went into producing it, and it's lost in terms of lost nutrition, but it's also causing methane emissions because it's rotting away somewhere. And if we help avoid this food waste becoming food waste with, for example, food banks, then we put this food to a good purpose, meaning feeding people. But sometimes the good to go dates that are regulation that are really, really done with a health and safety angle to it, so it's a good cause, lead us to maybe not using the food as long as it's actually good for. And they're softening some of that may unlock different opportunities. And that's what I wanted to highlight. So it's very, very different what policy can actually do, but how it actually unlocks the action on SLCPs.
Yeah. And the key thing is that we have to halve emissions by 2030 to have a 50-50 chance of hitting the Paris Agreement safety goals. And these are short-lived climate pollutants. Some are very short-lived, like black carbon, soot, which affects human health, but also drops onto icy areas and causes more rapid melting of glaciers. And so fast action is possible, and we need fast action because we are very close to those safety limits of the Paris Agreement. Okay, Martina, stay with us. That's really good. We have with us 4 absolutely fantastic guests. We have with us Heather Adair Rouhani. Okay, she's the Air Quality and Health Unit head at the World Health Organization. We've got Kimber Scavo, who is Foreign Affairs Officer at the US Department of State, Bureau of Oceans and International Environmental and Scientific Affairs. Welcome. We've got Peter Dairy, who's Director... Dairy or Dairy?
Dairy.
Dairy, okay. That's very appropriate. It sounds a bit like dairy, and you know we know that agriculture is very important in this story. But anyway, I won't go there. We've got Peter Dairy, who's Director responsible for the Environment Division at the Ministry of Environment, Science, Technology and Innovation in Ghana, and he's also co-chair of the Climate and Clean Air Coalition. So you're a very important man. We did have Pacifica from Kenya, but she's not with us right now. But we have Bruno Brazil. From Brazil. I bet you've had that joke many times. I'm rather sick of it from us Anglo-Saxons. But we have Bruno Brazil, Director of Sustainable Production and Irrigation, Ministry of Agriculture and Livestock, Brazil. And of course, the country that will host this very important UN climate conference, as we mentioned, COP30 in 2025. Let me start with you first, Heather. Just give us a brief understanding. I mean, the World Health Organization wants to make 2024 a really big year for action on clean air. Briefly, what would success look like in terms of what you could achieve in 1 year? We're already started the year, so there's not much left really, is there? But what would success look like, and how does it relate to policy and these short-lived climate pollutants? Yeah, could you thread that needle a little bit?
Sure, it'd be my pleasure. Thanks for the question. So air pollution is a collective problem for collective action. We need policymakers in all different sectors, environment sector, energy sector, health sector, all working together in a very coordinated way, but an evidence-based way. So I think for me, seeing all the various sectors, including the health sector, all these environment sector, energy sector, make commitments that are really health-wise decisions, where tools and information resources are really used to derive that policy, where health impact assessment and these things are used to see what are the analysis, what is going to be successful for health and climate. We have 7 million deaths a year attributed to air pollution. This is huge. If we could really scale back the air pollution that's being emitted each day with high level commitments, we can really protect health, protect our climate, and protect food security, protect a variety of things to make sure development is heading in the right direction and sustainable. So I would really like to see ambitious commitments from policymakers in different sectors. I would really like to see the health sector taking a stronger leadership role. We have doctors, clinicians prescribing clean air. We need to get them on board. We need ministers of health calling on other ministries of energy and ministry of environment, really working together collectively to drive this action and make sure that we are really helping those who really need it the most, and that we're really tackling those sources that are the largest sources of air pollution, are really having the strongest impacts on health.
Just a follow-up question. I mean, it's absolutely clear that, every country's kind of different in the world. We all have different challenges in different countries. A country like India, we had a lady on our show in Dubai who was saying that it used to be that the air quality was way off the Richter scale of the WHO limits for like half a year. Now it's nearly all year round, So different places, different countries. But is there one pollutant we should be working on faster, one of these super pollutants than all the others, or is it all of them? Maybe methane and air quality is a bit different, although there is a link, of course. But is it black carbon and smog, which is tropospheric ozone?
Yes, I think that the biggest driver, where we have the strongest evidence, where I think there's a lot of health benefit, is fine particulate matter, which includes black carbon, right? So there's a lot of opportunity when we're really focusing on those. Ozone, as well as an important health damaging pollutant, is not the level that we have for fine particulate matter, including black carbon. So I think that would be a really important area. And there's so many other co-pollutants that are emitted at the same time as particulate matter. So by addressing that, you're actually going to be mitigating a bunch of other emissions and pollutants that are health and climate damaging.
So we're going to another terrific guest now, who is also passionate about air pollution. This is Kimber Scavo, who's Foreign Affairs Officer of the US Department of State, Bureau of Ocean and International Environmental and Scientific Affairs. I think I introduced her before, but it's so good to do it twice. Kimber, the USA, a country that's done many great things with dealing with air pollution, but like everything in the world, nothing's ever finished. So you obviously have your challenges too. Is there policy from things like the Inflation Reduction Act or from other places that have recently come, or things you're looking forward to coming that can take things even further in terms of cleaning up the air?
Yes, thank you so much. And I share my colleagues' passion towards addressing air pollution. We are at a public health crisis, we're in an environmental crisis. We need to work together to address both air pollution and climate. The Inflation Reduction Act did help our states and local and tribal agencies be able to address climate. We were able to put a lot of grants out there and provide funding for programs to address climate. And the US has always been advanced on looking at air pollution. Our national ambient air quality standards were set a long time ago. We've had a single pollutant program for a long time. And I have to say that the best way forward is to look at an integrated approach between air pollution and climate change. This will get at a lot of the non-CO2 pollutants. One example is we've been working with our United States Environmental Protection Agency, and they, in December, finalized a rule for methane on the oil and gas sector. So if you look at some of these sectors, they're the same. They're the same for climate that they are for air pollution. So I would say moving forward, and just a recommendation to other countries, let's look at these things together. Let's look at climate, let's look at biodiversity, let's look at public health, let's look at how these pollutants are affecting our environment, and have a more well-rounded policy and integrated management plan that looks at all of these at the same time.
I think you mentioned earlier to me that there'd also been action on methane from the oil and gas industry, because that's some kind of precursor towards smog.
Yes, thank you. In December, the EPA passed a methane rule on the oil and gas sector. We also look at methane as an ozone. It is an ozone precursor. So if you get reductions in methane to help climate, you're also helping reduce ozone. So you're helping address the air pollution issues for that pollutant.
And we're talking low-level ozone.
Low-level
We like the stuff
tropospheric
right
ozone.
up there, high up, high-flying stuff to protect us from skin cancer, but the low stuff, yeah, we don't want. Yeah.
Very, very important to address from a climate change perspective and air pollution.
Yeah. Peter, Ghana, right? Amazing country. I've been there. Fabulous place, great people. But you have your challenges as well, environmental challenges, the short-lived climate pollutants, the super pollutants as well. Is policy moving in your country towards addressing these suite of super pollutants, as they're called?
Yes, so thank you very much, Nick. That is very true. We have quite a number of environmental challenges, but we see policies on short-lived climate pollutants as policies that can help us achieve double gains, not only contributing to the climate crisis, but also the sustainable development gains that come along with the implementation of such policies. So we started first by developing an SLCP action plan for Ghana. And we did this by first identifying the sectors where SLCPs are coming from, like methane, nitrous oxide, black carbon, and so on and so forth. So after we identified them, the first thing was first to find out how we can abate emissions from those sectors and then set appropriate targets that we needed to work on in the action plan. So once that was done, we translated this into our next round of NDCs, which were submitted in 2021 to the UNEP. And so we have identified key sectors like agriculture, the waste sector, the oil and gas sector, cook stoves sector, and many others. And after identifying this and developing the action plan, what we needed to do was then to mainstream these actions from the different sectors in sectorial policies. And so in our climate smart action plan, we have issues on SLCPs in there. That is to enable the agriculture sector to address them, especially when it comes to manual management and also feed management in the agriculture sector. Then when it comes to the oil and gas, we currently have developed an energy transition plan, and then you have SLCPs in there that we need to address. We have gone ahead to develop a policy on no flaring and no venting in Ghana. We are currently looking at developing legislations to deal with fugitive emissions. So these are some of the policies that are coming from the oil and gas sector. Now, when it comes to the waste sector, equally, we have identified key areas when it comes to landfill management. We need to engineer most of our landfills and also to manage liquid waste in country. And these have also found place in the sanitation policy of Ghana. When it comes to even the forestry sector, looking at waste from biomass and also emissions that come from that sector, we've also integrated this, and we have revised our renewable energy law that compels industries in the oil and gas sector to go for offsets and also to undertake projects that will reduce methane and also emissions from biomass.
Okay.
So there are quite a number of policies that are being developed and being integrated, not just at the national level, but also at the sectoral level. And we are further mainstreaming this also at the subnational level, medium-term development plans. And so we have currently developed the guidelines for subnational level authorities to be able to mainstream what is in the sectors into their local plans. And beyond just providing them with the guidelines, we have helped them to develop the necessary indicators. And it has become part of the administrative monitoring system for the National Development Planning Commission when it comes to monitoring local authorities. And so right from the national level down to subnational level, we have made sure that policies are reflected. And let me just say that recently we passed the vehicle emissions regulations. And currently in Ghana, we have emission tax. It's just also to make sure that people move to e-vehicles, because the president launched the e-vehicle policy at the last COP, And so we are trying to encourage people to move away so that we can reduce emissions from the transport sector. Also, we are talking about black carbon and soot.
Yep.
So quite a number of policies,
Yes.
legislations to ensure that this happens. So there's quite a lot of things happening, and I'm happy also that this year Ghana has the opportunity to host the Air Quality Conference, and this will be an opportunity to display what we are doing and also learn from others to see how we can further carry out more work.
Peter, that was very, very comprehensive. Stay with us. Bruno, what about Brazil? You're in the area of livestock and agriculture, obviously potentially a lot of methane emissions, nitrous oxide emissions coming from agriculture too, that then form this smog, this low-level ozone, etc. What kind of policies are emerging in your country that, to deal with these short-lived climate pollutants?
Thanks for the question, Nick. Actually, the ag sector in Brazil is the main source of methane and nitrous oxide emissions nationally. And due to that, Brazil has established a sectorial policy to combat climate change in agriculture since 2010. And actually, it was a success in these 14 years. During the first 10 years, we managed to expand the adoption of sustainable practices and technologies into around 50 million hectares and mitigate around 200 million tons of CO2 equivalent. And now we are being more ambitious. Since we have signed it, that we have joined the Global Methane Pledge, we have also launched the second phase of the sectorial plan, and we are targeting to mitigate 1 gigatons of CO2 equivalent. So we are intensifying production, livestock production, thereby reducing methane emissions. And we are also using inoculants instead of fertilizers to reduce nitrous oxide emissions. Let me tell you a little bit about this example, for example. The policy works because it was framed pragmatically. So we have put the farmers at the center of the policy, and we are considering their needs. All the technologies, the science-based solutions that we are offering to them, they are profitable. And the government is providing loans and technical assistance for them to adopt. We are not providing subsidies, we are providing loans. And then we can make a virtuous circle of profitable producers that adopt sustainable technologies. One example, the use of inoculants. For soybean production in Brazil, we use bacteria that inoculate the seeds and establish in the roots of the plant, and they capture nitrogen from the atmosphere and fertilize the plant. So the producers, they do not have to use chemical fertilizers. Since the inoculant is around 10 times cheaper than the chemical fertilizer, only from 2010 to 2019, this has saved to the Brazilian producers almost $70 billion. That's why they adopted. But this has also mitigated around 21 million tons of CO2 equivalent from nitrous oxide emissions. And that's how the policy is being framed and how we are expanding sustainable practices in Brazil.
Right, very interesting indeed. No, I'm glad you explained what inoculants are, yeah, I mean, this is so important that you're finding alternatives. And interesting enough, it's cheaper than fertilizer, because I was going to come back on the fact that, you know, I mean, we're now going to have a little bit more of a roundtable talk about policies, but I mean, obviously one of the elephants in the room for climate change generally, but also for these super pollutants as well, might well be, and maybe people could comment on this, is that we live in a world where, as we know from the International Monetary Fund, the fossil fuel subsidies are now directly at 1.7 trillion. I think it is at 1.3 trillion US dollars globally. And the damage they cause is much higher, of course. It's 7 or so societies subsidizing those things. And of course, fossil fuels make fertilizers as well. So often farmers don't have much choice because they've been given a subsidized option. But you've got something that's actually means you don't even have to worry about that. But I know WHO has been quite strong about the whole issue of fossil fuel subsidies and air quality. Are you still campaigning on that, very much so?
For sure. We definitely feel that there's an important phase out of fossil fuels, but it needs to be done in an important way, considering the energy transition. But we really need to prioritize those areas where we really can capture those money and put that money towards protecting health. protecting the environment. There's a lot of other great places that these subsidies can be used. The fossil fuel companies are making a lot of money. They can advance and use other places, and we need to be really targeting for the health argument to mitigating the fossil fuel subsidies.
It has been a long promise, hasn't it, by the G20 to do something on this, but it's never quite been pulled off. And I know it's complex getting countries off fossil fuel subsidies, but it does seem, as the UNDP campaign with Frankie the Dinosaur says, it's like dinosaurs subsidizing incoming comets. You know, it's kind of like, seems a bit crazy, right? But is the fossil fuel subsidy an issue in Ghana? Didn't you try to phase it out at some point?
We have phased it out.
You have phased it out?
Currently, we pay economic values for the use of fuel. And so there are no subsidies when it comes to the energy sector, completely gone.
Right.
And it's working. I think it's very important. But of course, like you said, how do you redirect these subsidies, you know, to take care of the issues relating to air quality and things like that? And that is just some of the arguments that are currently going on when it comes to the emission tax that has been introduced in Ghana now. How do we create a fund that we can channel all these monies into it to address environmental issues and also air quality issues? So that's what the government wants to do now, to make sure that these funds are earmarked for those purposes, and also used to also address some of the inefficiencies in the transport sector. Apart from just the regulations, also making sure that the appropriate infrastructure is put in place to ensure that people who bring e-vehicles, for example, charging stations and other things are installed, so that when people buy e-vehicles, they will have access to these infrastructure. So the carbon tax, or what we call the emissions tax, is going to be channeled to doing some of these things, which I think is
right. So in other words, getting rid of the subsidies that cause damage and using those subsidies to subsidize things that do good and get an industry on its feet and help with the air quality issue and reduce the pollution that's linked with it. I mean, electrification of transportation is going like topsy in the United States. There are targets, I think, to phase out the internal combustion engine, as in Europe. Is this going to have a major benefit for air quality, do you think, in the US?
Oh, yes, for certain. And I think we've had a successful sector-based strategy for a long time. This is one that we need to do, and we need to get better about implementing it. We have, and building the infrastructure across the entire country, not just the big cities. But I think we've done a good job at looking at the transportation sector, looking at the power sector, looking at these sectors. I think what's missing for the U.S. still is behavioral change. How can we also look at and incentivize cities and local areas to invest in renewable energy? We have to get a little bit more innovative on how we're doing these things. How are our land use policies affecting how people are living? And so I 100% believe in strong sector-based policies for these sectors and getting real stringent standards on the tailpipes, on the cars, electrifying cars, looking at better standards on our industrial sources. But we also have to look at how can we change how we're actually living? What are our choices that we're making every day that will help improve the quality of our life, have us breathing cleaner air, and helping us address the climate crisis?
Is there a challenge here as well, though? Because what you've touched upon, of course, is we'll move away back into agriculture in a minute, I think, Martina. But renewable energy is doubling every 3 years or something globally, which is absolutely fantastic. And if I got those numbers right, but that's something like that. And obviously, you need that renewable energy for the electrification of transportation and all the benefits that come from that. But wasn't it last year there were stories about in the US and Europe and also in the UK that the time to get an interconnector to a new wind farm was taking 10 years, 12 years, 13 years, whatever, because nobody had been thinking, what about the grid, right? So I know that there's some movement in the UK and there's maybe some movement in the US on this, but this would seem to be a critical policy, right? If you want to decarbonize transportation, you need renewable energy, but if you're not getting the interconnectors, that seems pretty crazy, right? So that's a policy issue, isn't it, for governments, but also states, I suppose, in the US. Do you have any problems with the interconnectors in Ghana, or is that getting things connected to the grid?
No, so yes, we have renewable energy that is connected to the grid. Currently, we have about almost 8.5 megawatts connected directly to the grid in Ghana. We also have the standalone solar systems. Some are even in the form of mini grids that take care of communities and smaller areas. And so, yes, beyond just having the grid system connection, there is also opportunity to have standalone installations that can even be used for establishing the infrastructure for charging, because you can have a standalone system that can directly charge the batteries.
Charge directly, yes, the batteries, yeah.
All that. And you can also have that installed in homes and all that. So that is what we intend doing, not just from the grid, but also trying to see how. And then we have areas we call off-grid areas. We call them overseas, because we have rivers that have cut those communities completely off. And it's very difficult to move the grid through over the water or through under the water to those communities.
So
it's better
need
to
mini
have
grids, right? They need mini grids and they need standalone stuff, yes,
Exactly.
to actually then join this electric vehicle revolution.
Yes.
Absolutely. Getting back to agriculture from the Brazilian point of view. So, I mean, the issue of livestock is always fascinating, because there's always a big debate about whether we have too many cows in the world and too many goats, right? So, is there a way of reducing emissions from the livestock without cutting numbers, or do we need policies that think about how many cattle a land can support? Or I know it's politically complex, right? Because then you're dealing with some very strong political interests like the livestock industry. But what's the thinking here on this in terms of livestock emissions?
I believe there's certainly a better and more pragmatic way to do that. Actually, why we produce food or meat, we produce to feed people. We have a growing population. We have an emerging economies where people are rising from poverty to middle class, and they start or they increase animal protein consumption. So we do not need to limit arbitrarily the number of animals. We can increase efficiency. You can reach the same amount, you can achieve the same amount of meat or dairy products or milk by increasing efficiency of production, by increasing productivity. So if I can reduce age-to slaughtering for a cattle, because you are feeding it right, you are providing grasses well managed, you are putting them with the right diet, you can decrease the number of days that they are emitting methane in the field. And thereby, you can feed the population, assure food security, while reducing the intensity of emissions per unit of product. We are bending the curve. We are not doing the same thing that we've done in the 20th century. We are going to feed the population in the 21st century with more efficient production systems. Thereby, you can conjugate both needs.
So we're coming to the end of the show. We're very close to the end. So what are the plans for each of your, I was going to say countries, but you can't really call the WHO a country, can you? But but maybe you hear some stuff from countries as well. Is there a real ambition to revise national climate plans, NDCs up, to include these suites of pollutants and to raise ambition above and beyond where we are right now? Do you get a sense from either your own governments or governments that you know? I mean, has everybody got it that 1.5 is definitely very close to being lost if we don't act? Yeah, what's your sense? I mean, please just jump in, somebody talk. I mean,
I would say right now, 2024 there's a lot of momentum in the U.S. We have pedal to the metal right now on all aspects of addressing air pollution and climate change. We're looking at the sectors, we're looking at our standards, we're looking at voluntary programs, we have the global methane pledge, we have all of these different components of a wide strategy when the momentum is fast. I think the public is starting to recognize that we have issues, and so they're starting to participate more, which is great.
Maybe the question to you is more, Peter, yes, I'm sure you can put as many policies in place, but the international finance also has to support what you're doing as an African country, right?
Yes.
And that's always an issue. that needs to accompany this journey to Azerbaijan and then to Brazil, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
So yes, so we see one important entry point, which is Article 6. And there with Ghana,
That's trading markets,
yes,
carbon markets.
Yes,
Yeah.
to be able to rope in private sector capital and also provide private sector the needed investments for projects. Because you need to move away from just ambition on paper to ambition on the ground. And that's what we intend doing. So to break the barriers that we currently have, which is one is finance, and using Article 6 to overcome that. And we've already identified projects for Article 6. We've set aside about 24 million tons of CO2 to come from that sector. And currently there are projects that are being demonstrated in order to be able to convince others to come on board. So we have a project in rice fields where we are trying to reduce emissions, methane emissions from rice fields. We have projects in waste sector where we are trying to convert waste to compost. We have a number of cook stove projects that are running, and currently we're trying to develop one for the oil and gas sector. So that's what we're trying to do, move ambition from paper to doing something on the ground. For us, we see this implementation as a way of helping us to achieve ambition, but not just the ambition, but also to be able to attract finance. And we see a lot of potential when it comes to the SLCP sector, the sectors that I've mentioned, because most of our emission trading activities are going to come from those sectors. So that's why we see it as very critical for us. And that is the way we're going to use. And I believe that many countries can go that way, you know, because what we are all complaining about is finance. And so if we can develop more Article 6 projects in those sectors, then of course
because you take the finance much more
barriers.
into your own hands. You're not just waiting for overseas development aid from richer countries who feel quite poor right now, whether they're right or wrong. You can take it a little bit into your own hands.
Exactly.
Brazil, I mean, COP30, President Lula's back. Isn't it going to be like the biggest moment since 1992 in Brazil? I mean, the Rio Earth Summit, isn't it going to be... I mean, Brazil will have to, as a host in a sense, demonstrate also greater ambition as well, because that's the nature of the process. Is it quite an exciting time? Is there a lot of activity in the ministries and thinking and planning about wins that you can bring forward at COP30?
There is a lot of work and a lot of hope and a lot of ambition too. Actually, Brazil is highly committed with the mission to keep to 1.5 degree to limit this increase in the temperature. And we are also working hard to update our NDCs and to progressively be more ambitious for the following years.
Including on the short-lived climate pollutants.
Yeah, we already have our NDCs are economy-wide and they cover all greenhouse gases, but we are going to improve the ambition.
Okay.
If I may come in on that point, because we've been working very, very closely together on this, and I think it's absolutely amazing to see. I mean, there's a presidential commitment to do this in a very, very fast, on a very fast track. This whole review, and there's a support mechanism that is there actually to help, and obviously there's a lot of capacity in Brazil in-house, but then. Targeted, it's almost like acupuncture, right? Bringing in targeted support to actually drive this faster. And that's part of this momentum that has been created. And obviously there's 3 sectors that touch on methane. This global methane pledge momentum. It was a moment, it turned into momentum, and now there's a bit of a movement out there with over 155 countries doing this. We've supported 30 countries alone on methane roadmap development.
You being the Climate and Clean Air Coalition.
Exactly.
Yes, okay.
Thank you.
Not being you, we being you and me sitting on the sofa.
Exactly. So yeah, CCAC has been supporting that. This will be coming online, and as Peter was saying, this planning process and how is critically important as a first step. But from there, we have to take it further. And I think that's where more emphasis will come throughout this year. But I see a real step up. There's a lot of interest, and some countries have already started doing this process. So,
Heather, you can have a last word if you want to say something.
I'm very happy to. I have to say it was at the COP in Dubai, we had the first ever health day where we had over 143 ministers of health sign this ministerial declaration to really take action on climate change for health. With the publication of our new air quality guidelines in 2021, we have ministers of environment, ministers of health asking for technical support. I have to say we have the number of countries asking for technical support from the ministries of health, I would say have quadrupled, and the people and the action and the support that they're required. So they're really waking up, and it's going to help if we can really have the health voice and leverage this health argument. We're going to change that behavior in both the population, policy making, governments. It's a time for
private
action.
sector.
And private sector, for sure.
Exactly. Good. I think we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed, everybody. I think the only thing I did that was wrong was not to give you a climate love from We Don't Have Time. You will receive climate love immediately when this broadcast is ended. Everybody else is branded with... Where's mine gone to?
It's hard.
Oh, mine's
It's
sitting
green
here
heart.
on top of my
Yeah,
shelf.
I'm missing out, but yeah, looking forward to it.
So thank you very much indeed. That's the end of episode 2 here with the Climate and Clean Air Coalition here in Nairobi. And do tune in to the next episode, where we're going to look at the very important issue, which we touched upon briefly, of financing getting rid of these super pollutants. So thank you very much indeed.